Hello everyone, this is Mili Saha. I'm from Bangladesh. I'm an associate professor of English at Jagannath University here. As you know, my today's presentation topic is Indigenous students' identity shifts and maintenances in social discourses, translanguaging matters. So to introduce my research, I want to share a bit about the context. Like Bengali or Bengali is the majority ethnic and linguistic group of the 98% people in Bangladesh, where Bangla as a national language may create learning and communication issues in the 54 ethnic minority groups. So that's obvious in literature. Bangla is still the principal and mandatory instructional language in all government schools, colleges, and universities, even in the minority concentrated hill text regions. So for many reasons, including teachers' language deficiencies, and lack of training, most of the mainstream schools implement the monolingual ideology of using Bangla as the dominant medium of instruction and restrict indigenous languages in education. The ethnic minority children living in the remote areas or having little or no experience of using Bangla suffer from language disadvantages at elementary level to start learning in Bangla. Besides, they have to use Bangla often to integrate to mainstream society, which creates a struggle of maintaining their community languages and indigenous identity. Such compulsory dominant language socialization results in the culture and language losses of the ethnic minorities, as Nguyen found, hence ensuring the inclusion of indigenous children in mainstream education through mother tongue based multilingual education is a major challenge in the current circumstances. So, all these things are quite true in my context, and the theories that support my research are bilingual learners' language practices and beliefs are reflected in identity perceptions, which are impacted by socio-cultural relations, interactions, and investments. And translanguaging engages bilinguals in dynamic community language practices and exercises agency in selecting and deploying different language repertoires in various communications. So, translanguaging highlights bi or multilingual speakers' complex language practices, making sense of their bi or multilingual choices in diverse situations. So, we cannot ignore that they need it for different purposes and different settings, and they use different languages and develop all those languages in a balanced way. So therefore, these ethnic minority students who possess trans identity are flexible in selecting and applying different forms and resources for serving various purposes in numerous contexts. And even though an indigenous language usually has a monolingual norm, the educated young people here code switch, and this practice molded by history, ideologies, and large-scale discourses at the societal level reflects a hybrid identity formed by socio-political power structures. So, using a second language in their everyday communications, education, and employment itself is a linguistic imperialism. So that's going on here. Translanguaging processes maintain dynamic communication activity flows, utilizing interconnected meaning-making networks that continuously expand with unfixed directions. To look at my positionality as a research, I found in a local literature that only a single study regarding this language and education policy in Bangladesh was conducted in 2010, and that's too old. However, no studies have examined how the language minority groups negotiate their language and socio-cultural identities against the monolingual Bengali community, and that's why my research investigates Bangladeshi ethnic minority students' perceptions and practices of multilingual identity maintained and constructed through language use and management. So it analyzes how the indigenous students translanguaging between L1 ethnic language, L2 Bengali, and the priority second language English involves language shifts and identity transformation through social interactions with different communities. So the research questions include what are the beliefs and concepts of ethnic minority students about their linguistic identity at home, education, and social integration, and how do they maintain and construct ethnic and mainstream identities as bi or multilinguals, and to what extent does translanguaging affect their perceived identity and communication management through transforming perspectives and shifting experiences. So to choose the research framework, I went for qualitative method to elicit the students' perceptions, and I use semi-structured interviews as tools. Those are online, and 10 Chakma students coming from the Chittagong Hill Tracts area and studying at different private and public universities were the participants. Since Chakma is the largest indigenous group in Bangladesh, so I went for them because they are educationally and culturally advanced, more advanced than the other groups, and data were analyzed thematically using content analysis and round theory method. So let's look at the findings. So the respondents said they are confident as Bangla speakers who like speaking the language since it is essential for academic or social communications. The respondents use Bangla with the outer or Bengali community, although they mainly speak in Chakma to their community. Even they use mixed code like Chakma Bangla. So one of the respondents said pure Chakma has been rare with the current generations. We use some particular English words as part of Chakma since we do not know all the Chakma words, hence translanguaging is inevitable. There is their identity. So translanguaging is need-based, which is influenced by the context, situations, listeners, and culture. While speaking to the families or community members, mixing Chakma, Bangla, English is normal. While speaking to the teachers of Bengali or other peers, we need additional cautions. The beginning at any stage is always challenging with all odds and diversity. So they do have many questions about language and lifestyle and culture. So she feels separate because of look, face, language, and lifestyle, but her diverse language instantly discriminates. I never felt a language neutral identity because Bangla is my second language used for academic and social purposes, while Chakma is my identity. Identity is more influenced by culture than the integration process with the leading societies. Communication settings shape my perceived identity, and the cultural community shapes my language habits. I prefer Chakma identity, although I do not ignore Bangladeshi or national identity. So this is critical and this is shifting, and they need to work hard to maintain both the identities in a balanced way. So code mixing and translanguaging help in using languages, and communications are easy or relaxed. She does not opt for monolingual education or sociolinguistic identity. Instead, she likes switching, which allows opportunities for greater social, academic, and economic access. So it doesn't mean I like Bangla, but we make it a habit to meet various communication needs. I use Chakma all over with my community members, but I use Bangla with the greater community and frequently switch to English since both need a lingua franca. So this has been a habit, and she doesn't recognize trans identity positions. Instead, prioritizes her dual identity apart from bi or multilingual identities. So the mainstream community othering and differences have influenced my translinguistic nature and habits. I maintain both my community and national identities equally while using different languages. So languages shifts actually creates identity shifts, and our family does not react to translanguaging, although it is reinforced to speak only Chakma to hold the cultural identity. The older family members count it as respect. Pure Chakma is rare now, limited to remote inhabitants. Otherwise, everyone uses translanguaging and widely accepts as a new culture. The community considers it as a process of standardizing the language. So, translanguaging has a real role play in their identity formation because they find it a way to get closer to the leading communities or the mainstream societies. So speaking two or three languages is not a challenge at a particular age since they are mentally ready to do that. I don't think translanguaging is a problem since we live in a country as indigenous groups who are not part of the nation. That's sad. And we have our languages besides the national one. Rather, learning two or three languages at a time is an advantage that helps raise the confidence of communicating with the wider communities and languages. So they welcome the language. This translanguaging is normal, but speaking Bangla normally doesn't change my dominant Chakma identity and cultural perceptions. So there is a separation. They never forget that. Although speaking Bangla increases affinity feeling, I do not always feel deficient or different as a Chakma speaker, although some abusive words make me feel excluded. Harassment is also there, abuse is there. So why should they abuse me? I am Bangladeshi too. There is crisis and struggle with identity differences while being harassed. So the family and community have mainly influenced her language identity. And as she said, I do not use translanguaging for identity search though. Instead, it is a habit habit of mixing the languages for both audiences and speaker benefits in the diverse context we interact. And after going to school, my language habit has changed to do well in studies and socialization. To conclude the research, I just want to say the complex and shifting linguistic activities of the Chakma group maintain a complex relationship between their perceptions and practices. Their language actions are inherently social and mediated with the necessity of the dominant context. However, they hold a priority Chakma identity, which is strongly borne by their history, language, and culture. And choosing particular languages and switching to more dominant languages is a standard feature. They change from the Chakma to Bangla, do not retreat to Chakma from Bangla, and repeatedly switch to English. So the pattern discloses the top-down sociolinguistic power structures and translinguistic discriminations. It also exposes the role of Chakma languages as their first and cultural identity, since they differ from the other indigenous groups by language only. So the analysis shows respondents express their social, ethnic, and national identities through language choices. However, the Chakma group perceives their ethno-linguistic identity as weak, which results in imbalanced bilingualism. Hence, the conclusion warns of potential future Chakma language laws. It calls for implementing language education policies, incorporating strategic planning to maintain the ethnic minority population's linguistic and cultural diversity. So that's all from me today. These are the references that I used for my research. And thank you everyone for hearing me. If you have any questions, you can forward this via the following emails. And the pictures that I used in my slides are taken from UNDP and UNESCO websites with permission. Thank you again.